Good morning. We're closing out the week now with our continuing study in 2 Peter, and we're in chapter 2, and today we're going to read verses 10 through 12. And Peter is going to pick up now his description of these false teachers. He's already given us a bit of a description of them. He says they're going to deny the Lord that bought them. They're going to exploit people with greed. They're going to win a lot of people. They're going to be popular. They're going to have a lot of followers and so forth. He's told us a great deal about them. He's assured us they're not going to get away with this. But now he's going to expand on the description of these false teachers so that we can recognize them. So picking up in chapter 2, verse 10, he says, "This is especially true of those who follow the corrupt desire of their sinful nature and despise authorities." Now he's talking about these false teachers. So they just follow that desperation cycle. They're driven by self-preservation, self-gratification. They just follow their desires, feed their desires as a kind of a philosophy of life. And he adds, they despise authority. They don't want anybody to be giving them boundaries. They reject boundaries. Now he's going to go on. He says they're bold and arrogant. So here's a further description. So these false teachers, they're bold in what they teach, and they're arrogant. They're very assured of themselves. These men are not afraid to slander celestial beings, meaning they speak about angels. Again, Gnosticism had a lot to do with angels, talking authoritatively about angels and things that they didn't really know anything about. They would have these meditative, illuminated experiences, and they would speak from that experience, but they didn't really know they were being deceived. So he says they're bold and they're arrogant. These men are not afraid to slander celestial beings, say things about angels that they didn't even know what they were talking about. Verse 11, "Yet even angels, though they are stronger and more powerful, do not bring slanderous accusations against such beings in the presence of the Lord." So he's saying that angels don't even speak disrespectfully about one another. Even the enemy angels, he says, they know better. Verse 12, "But these men blaspheme in matters they do not understand." Further description. So they talk very boldly, blasphemily, disrespectfully about God, about angels, about his angels, holy and unholy angels. Then it says they are like, now this is really a big explanation. They are like brute beasts, creatures of instinct, born only to be caught and destroyed, and like beasts, they too will perish. Now, you got to really take in what he's saying here. He's saying these false teachers who are speaking about all these illuminated spiritual experiences, and so they're sounding real flowery and talking authoritatively about angelic entities and angelic experiences and so on. Because remember, the Gnostics thought that salvation was a matter of going through the levels of the archons, the angels, having more and more illuminated experiences until you finally come to full enlightenment and you realize you are God. You had a part of God in you, and now you're free from matter, you're free from physicality, and you kind of blend back into God. So to speak about this, but what Peter is saying, the truth is about them, they're becoming more and more like animals. They are living more and more like animals and less like humans made in the image of God. Peter is saying instead of them being guided and governed by their God-enlightened reasoning faculties and conscience, in other words, God's truth, they weren't taking in God's truth and allowing it to govern them, guide them, guard them, mold their character, shape their decisions, and so on. No, rather, they were yielding to their desires. Their desires were ruling their life. And therefore, they were becoming less fully human and less fully alive, less like Christ, in other words, and more like the way an animal functions. Animals function on the basis of their desires and their instincts. When we walk through life, we are always in motion. We are always in a developmental stage. We are either growing to become more fully human, more fully alive, which means more like Christ, our Creator, partaking more of his image, having his image restored in us, or we are becoming less like Christ. We are yielding to our desires, yielding to the drives of our body. We're yielding to greed. We're yielding to the voices of society that are counter to God's will and design for human life. And without knowing it, we are living more and more and more like animals. And I'll bet you, some of you know human beings, they're darn near being like an animal. In fact, some of them, to be honest, are worse than animals. They do things more ruthless, more cruel, more destructive than any animal would. But Peter's saying these false teachers, now get the picture, they've got a lot of followers according to Peter. They deceive a lot of people. They're talking in all these high spiritual terms, very complex terms. Gnosticism is very complicated. So they're impressive and they're bold. They're talking about angels and they're telling stories that they have just made up to impress people. But deep inside, he says, they're becoming less like humans, less like their Creator Christ, and more functioning daily like animals, just living to feed themselves, to feed their desires. So this helps us to recognize these false teachers. We'll pick this up next week.